Welcome to the Practicing Drummer podcast. Before we get started, I just want to acknowledge that it's taken me way longer than I thought it would to get back into the swing of making episodes. When releasing the last batch, I knew that I was going to be sidelined for a while, which is why I did the whole season thing. And instead of going into all of that here, I'll just put a link in the show notes to a blog post that I wrote called A Hearing Test Saved My Life. A big chunk of last year was pretty intense for me, and if you want to know more, you can read about it there. And instead of going back to the season-based schedule, I think I'm just going to put out episodes as I record them. I'm planning on doing about one a month, maybe more as I get back into the groove, but I've got some really cool guests lined up already. In this episode, I'm bringing you a conversation I had with Ronnie Burrage in March of 2024. I've been a fan of his for years, and I was really excited to talk to him. From performing with Duke Ellington at just 9 years old, to playing with Sonny Rollins, Metheny, McCoy Tyner, and countless others, he's had a really impressive career. He's currently staying busy teaching, working with his nonprofit called World Rhythm Academy, and playing with his band, Holographic Principle. This episode's a little bit on the long side, but I urge you to stick around. Near the end, Ronnie tells some great stories about his friendships with Kenny Clarke and Philly Joe Jones. Ronnie was really fun to talk to and very open. I hope you enjoy this one. All right, Ronnie Burrage, thanks so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. When you reached out to me on Instagram, I freaked out. I've been a fan of yours for a long time. I remember in high school, an older drummer gave me a tape of Jack Walrath, one of the, maybe Neohippus, I think.
Oh, yeah.
And I think
like that record. Yeah. That was a good
yes.
record.
Oh, yeah,
That was fun. Is that the one with Abercrombie?
I don't even know. You know, it was just a blank cassette that I got. So
Oh, I got you. Because I did several recordings with Jack. I know we had some with Kenny Garrett, the Masters of Suspense.
Yeah.
Recordings. We did another one with Willie Nelson, which was actually Grammy nominated. We did the music of Hank Williams. We did a Neohippus one. I think that has John Abercrombie on guitar. And then we did another one that had some other great people on it. Just, Jack was. We had some really fun, nice recordings.
Oh, yeah. You've been on so many awesome recordings and have had such a cool career. You know, I was emailing Billy Drummond earlier this week, and I told him you were going to be a guest.
Oh, nice.
He was super excited. He said that he remembered seeing you in 80 or 81, I think, with McCoy Tyner and Ron Carter when you were playing opposite of Tony, Herbie, Ron, and Wynton.
That must have been in Virginia at the Virginia Festival. Back then, I think they had the cool jazz festivals. I think that's what that was.
Oh, yeah. That would make sense. He said it blew his mind. I think it was the first time he ever saw you. And he said he'll never forget it. It was just awesome. So.
Oh, wow. Thank you, Billy. You know, I tried to reach him last week because my production company, I get contracting jobs, right?
Mm-hmm.
I unfortunately couldn't do it because I was on tour with my band. But
yeah, and I wanted to talk to you about that too. And this conversation, interview, whatever you want to call it, it's going to jump around a lot because I did a lot of research over the last couple weeks, and man, your career has been wild. You've been all over the place. You've been all over the country, living all over the country, working all over the country, touring, hitting all continents, playing with all the masters, your own projects. So I guess just to cover what you've been up to now, I want to hear about how the tour went with Holographic Principle.
So actually, we had a really wonderful tour. I'm kind of like breaking in a new configuration, right, of Holographic Principle. Now, it's not breaking in the musicians because the musicians in this particular configuration, we've been playing together since actually early 1980s.
Mm-hmm.
So, had the great Kim Clarke added on bass.
Oh, yeah. She's great. She was in Defunct with you, is that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, I'm one of the original members of Defunct. The original bass player was Melvin Gibbs. And you know, Kim joined later. And so I was on the way out when Kim joined, but we did do 2 tours of Europe together.
Oh, wow.
As the original configuration of Defunct, she was actually subbing for Melvin before she actually got hired full time. So that's how far back we go. She and I had a great band called Magnets with Rob Sheps on saxophones, And George Mitchell, great keyboardist. He was playing keyboards with us. He was also Diana Ross's musical director during the time. So, but we did a lot of original music. So, and then, you know, over the years, Kim and I have done all types of things. She's incredible. She does the Women Got Jazz Festival. She has a conglomeration of women from all over the world that she, you know, provides work for them. And that's a feat in itself. And I'm saying it because, you know, with my nonprofit, I do festivals every year. And I'm trying to bring in people from all over the world to be a part of it, to bring it to certain communities so they can, you know, learn about this music and the history about this music. And in doing that, also, you know, seeing diverse cultures, that we have to see each other as human beings. We can't have all this ignorance, man. It's so much separatism and hatred,
it's too much
racism. It's getting us nowhere. So the work we do is really involved in trying to heal a lot of things and trying to move people forward. So then the other member, Coomba Frank Lacey, he's hilarious. I mean, he's a professor at Manhattan School of Music. Now, he and I have done so many projects, I can't even begin to list them. However, I'll tell you a great story because I'm sure you're familiar with Tabo, Michael Carvin, the great drummer.
Oh, yes.
Michael Carvin,
yes, yes.
So Michael, originally from Texas, is where Frank is from, his father's from. So they've known Tabo forever. And as a teenager, when I came to New York, Michael Carvin was one of the guys wherever he was playing, I had to go try to stand outside if I couldn't get in to hear him play.
Yeah.
Right? So, you know, when I was very young, he noticed how I played. And he was another one. I also have to preface this whole thing by saying I've been extremely blessed because the great jazz innovators, majority of them kind of like took me under their wing, you know, when I came to New York. They were supportive. I mean, when I had my band, Art Blakey would show up at the gig. Elvin Jones would be at the gig, you know, Billy Higgins. And when I started to make the rounds after playing with McCoy and Jackie McLean and playing with people, they gave me substitute jobs, you know. Freddie Waits. The most work that I got being young was from Michael Carvin, Freddie Waits, Billy Higgins, Billy Hart, and even Jack DeJohnette. You know, I was in that fold. And then Danny Richmond. So I don't think that there's any drummers in my age bracket. I'm 64 now.
Oh, you look great.
Oh, thank you, man. Thank you. I'm trying to stay up with my kids and I ride my bike and everything.
Oh,
I'm
great.
You know, because it's too much stress out here. Just living in the world with social media, man, can kill somebody. You know what I mean? If you get into this madness. So anyway, back to Michael Carvin. Frank Lacey had his first recording deal, and he was like, I don't know who to take to Europe with me. I don't know who to take. So Topo said, you need to take Ronnie Burrage because he's a band leader. He's already taken his bands to Europe, and he can help you. So, and Frank and I, you know, the only other meeting I had with him was when he was at Berkeley. I was with McCoy, and I was giving a master class. I had no clue what I was doing. I was, you know, 20 years old, but they were like, we want you to do a master class. So A.V. Sharp and I did a master class, and that was my beginning into like, hey, I kind of like doing this, you know what I mean? And so that was my beginning into wanting to, you know, aspire to teach in colleges and do more teaching. So, but anyway, so we did that first tour together. And we've been linked up since, doing many things. The young keyboard player is Alex Collins. He's been with me for about 5 years. He's incredible. He's growing. He's like a sponge. He's receptive to my experience because when he first started working with me, I was telling him about, well, first of all, from his research of me, he knows that I've been playing with all of the top keyboardists, right? And then when he learned that Kenny Kirkland was my roommate, of course, he wanted to pick my brain more.
Yeah.
But, you know, during that time period, there was a unique language, not just linguistically, but musically, that I developed with people like Kenny Kirkland, other players at that time. Marcus Miller and Marcus Miller and Kenny, we were kind of cutting our teeth together, playing in a lot of different bands in New York City. They were both in my band, the original Burrage Ensemble.
Right.
I had various people come in and out of the band, both the Marcelluses.
Yeah, and before we move on, I want to stop right there and ask you, I heard in another interview that you actually recorded that group
Yeah.
and you're trying to get the tapes.
Yeah.
Have you had any luck getting those masters back so you can release this music?
No, I have to take the time and get a lawyer and find out, go to that warehouse that it's
because this was Vanguard Studios, right?
Yeah. And I have to go do that. The late engineer David Baker, who did the engineering on from the day before he died, he was out there and he said, "Hey man, you got to get your tapes, you know." Actually, another great drummer, Jimmy Cobb, told me that he had to fight to get his tapes because they did the same thing to him. They said, "You know, you were a Vanguard artist." He says, "No, I wasn't a Vanguard artist. I rented the studio." And that's the same scenario I did. But they took the tapes and they moved them somewhere. So,
well, let's keep putting it out in the universe and let's hope that you get those tapes. I mean,
yeah, absolutely. I have a recording of it, which it was from a cassette and I've digitized it and done some work. It sounds pretty good, actually. I mean, it's actually could be released in that format, but of course, I've only get my 2-inch tapes.
So tell me more about playing with Alex, the keyboard player, because one thing that's really unique about you, and especially about Holographic Principle, is that you have a keyboard mounted right over your floor tom, and you will often play keys while drumming, while singing. And I want to talk to you a little bit more about that later. But how is that relationship with you and Alex, since you are jumping on keys and he's playing synthesizers and pianos?
It's actually excellent now because over the course of the 5 years, he understands this. He has more freedom that way, because there's a lot of things I can do where I can offer some pads and support from him that way if it's not too intricate rhythmically for me to do. And they can also, it can offer him freedom if he's taking a solo and I decide I want to put the background melody or something, I can accompany him that way. Not like he can't do it, but it kind of presents more freedom. I've been doing that, believe it or not, all the way back when I had the band with Kenny Kirkland. That's why I started doing it, because Kenny and I, when we lived together, that's how my kit was set up. That's how I compose. I feel absolutely more free when I have all of my instruments around me. And if, I can do different things and figure out different things to work. But Alex loves it because he knows there's tons of, he's got everything covered, but he also knows that there's some times if he needs some support, I can offer it. And there's some times where, I don't get in his way. We don't get in each other's way at all because it's all very musical. We primarily play 95% of my compositions.
Yeah.
And so they're composed for that scenario. I'll play here, he plays there. I'll play on the bridge and add something else or harmony line or something like that, and it all works.
Yeah, it's really amazing to watch you all play. I've never seen you in person, but I've seen, a lot of the stuff that's on YouTube, at Clement's Place, at Rutgers, right? Recently, just from a couple weeks ago, and then from previous years too. And it's really awesome to watch you not only play the drums like a wizard, but like I've already touched on keyboards too, but you're also like conducting the band from back there. You're giving people signals, reminding people of where sections are coming in and out. And I'm really curious if you can talk a little bit about your writing process and then how you finally complete a tune and then distill it down. Like, do you write out charts? Do you just rehearse can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, absolutely. So I compose all the time, right? Typically, if I'm lucky, and this doesn't happen all the time, I would say probably 70% of the time, I hear a song whole. So it's hard for me to sit down and transcribe it like that. So I'll start a process with like a little outline because I'm also not a great manuscript writer, right? And then I'll plug in my keyboard to Sibelius or Finale and I'll add some MIDI parts. And then I start rehearsals. Because a lot of times, songs aren't completely whole. I hear sometimes they're completely whole, and we can get to that. Now, my relationship with Alex is prime because Alex has perfect pitch. And I can say, hey, man, come over to the house. I got this thing. I really need you to help so we can describe it really quickly, right? I'll play it for him or I'll sing it for him. He runs it through a couple of times, and we're done. I had a grant a few years ago to orchestrate like 13 pieces of music. We took we took a good 7 months out of the year because, life goes on. I'm teaching and gigs and blah, blah, blah. But we got together and we charted it out. So now I have all this incredible orchestrated music, which I'm going to give you a little drop of something I'm trying to keep quiet, but it's going to be, some of it is going to be re-premiered at some of the HBCUs. That's all I'm going to say. I'm not going to say which one. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But I'm real excited about it because,
yeah.
I got marching band parts. I got the symphonic parts. I got the big band. I'm
amazing.
I'm edging. It's like we premiered it in St. Louis, and it was great. Blessing. I was able to pull together all these incredible St. Louis musicians, but it wasn't recorded. It wasn't recorded well. NPR had done an interview on me, so their cameras caught some, but it didn't have the multi-tracking and all of that. So
yeah, was that the clip I saw where they had a choir on stage? And did you have an uncle that flew in from France?
Yeah, and he passed away last January. So last year was really hard. He was key figure for me playing this music, actually. Yeah.
I'm sorry to hear that.
So, but to get back to my process on that started in probably junior high. I had a band. I had a big old afro. I was like, I wanted to be Michael Jackson or play drums. So I used to I had a band. We did Michael Jackson tunes. We did Sly and the Family Stone tunes. We did War. We were like, that was during the time when it was like really great bands. It wasn't just about one singer and anybody accompanying them, right? I used to teach everybody their parts. I had a piano in my house, a Fender Rose, and my drum set. I teach everybody their parts. And so we were learning, and we were getting ready to do this talent show, and my band got stage fright. So I said, man, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna put too much time. So I pulled the drums over. I had the Fender Rose there, and then there was an upright piano on the stage. I set the drums in the middle, and I started playing parts.
Were you up there alone?
Singing. I was alone, and I started singing. I played the bass line, played groove, and then I started singing to Michael Jackson. Oh, where the let me go, baby. Then I segued into another tune. I think I only did 2 tunes, but then the kids in school went crazy. I won the talent show.
Amazing.
And I said, you know what? There's something to this.
Yeah.
I kind of like this, So
you started off feeling pretty confident on stage, clearly.
Oh, yeah.
Have you ever struggled with being nervous, playing with anybody?
I'm nervous every single time I play.
You are?
It doesn't matter. Yeah. I mean, it's like, I know that I'm going to get a job done, and I know that this is a blessing. For me, the way I look at performance is like, man, I could have been dead this morning. I could have, something drastic. I could be dying. It's like, if I get up and I have an opportunity to play, I know that that's my job. God's given me a place and given me a blessing to do it. So, but in that, I am always nervous because, first of all, you want to go out and you want to have a nice audience. It doesn't matter if it's 1 or 2. I'm still going to play the same way, but you want to have an audience, especially like you were asking me about my tour. Like that's 90% self-produced.
Yeah, right.
So nowadays I'm operating as a veteran in the music, but without a booking. I don't have a manager. I don't have a booking agent.
Wow. So you're booking it all yourself.
I do everything myself. My wife helps me a lot, but primarily it's me. I have a guy in Italy, Hink Bukes. He helps with the European stuff, but primarily it's me. And it's one of them kind of weird things. It's like I've reached out to people that book a lot of the people that were students of mine, like my nephew, Jonathan Blake. I reach out to people that book him or other people, and they tell me like, oh, we don't have room on the roster. And I'm like, so it's like, it's a lot of weird things in the industry that I just have to push through because I'm transparent, I'm honest. But Craig, like maybe 25, 30 years ago, I was bitter because I felt that, man, after all of the stuff I've done, I can't get help with this thing. I'm not known enough to be booked on a regular basis, And it's funny, at the same time of my life, I was also a single father. I had to take care of my kids. I I was blessed. I got a job at Penn State. So a lot of things were able to work out, these 25 years. But even with that, I still push forward. I push forward trying to, push the envelope of music, and I continue to work.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, well, it's inspiring. A lot of musicians, especially now, are struggling with the same thing, having to make their own careers.
Yeah.
It's not like it was when you were coming up, when everything was going on.
I mean, I tell my students stories. It's like, man, from probably 1980 up until right before 9/11, I was constantly working. I mean, I'd have a message on my phone. Hey, Ronnie, it's Jack this and that, man. I can't do this tour. Can you do this with so-and-so? I'm like, yeah, Or I go home and I turn on the voicemail and it's like, hey, Ronnie, this is Wayne Shorter. I got a tour coming up. I'm like, yeah, So, and then you go from that to like, okay, what happened? But it's all good, man. I'm happy. I mean, it's like, I can tell those stories with authority and there's nothing made up about it at all. And I just keep pushing, I figure the universe, God has a bigger plan for me some kind of way. And so, I keep pushing. I have things happening. I got this orchestrated works that are going to be coming more constantly, I believe. I'm praying. So.
Yeah. Well, before we move on too much, I want to kind of circle back. You just talked about, Jack asking you to sub on a gig and Wayne calling you. I know that Billy Higgins, you subbed for him with Cedar Walton, yeah?
Yeah.
And then one thing I heard, I think it was one of your recent gigs that I watched, you told a story about Danny Richmond requesting that you be in the Mingus Big Band and Dynasty. Can you talk about that? What was your relationship like with Danny Richmond? And
Danny, they had that band with George Adams, the Adams Pulling Band, man. That band for me was like, it showed the rawness of the music. Like, I'm coming from McCoy, and that was completely just like, in your face, energy, raw. One of the things I have to segue into this, one of the things that I don't like now is that you see so many young players and they're just playing it cool. It's not, they don't like, I don't feel that, like I might not be here tomorrow. Back in the day, every time you saw people playing, you got that because they're surrounded by people they know they were comfortable with and they can push the envelope.
Mm-hmm.
This music, especially under the heading of jazz, is supposed to constantly push the envelope. It's not supposed to be background music. It's not supposed to be music where you're just trying to get your chops off. Your chops should be influenced by the spirituality of the music. My concept is that you should be able to play things that you can't fathom playing because of your adrenaline that's pumping in a performance. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure.
I see so many young players, you could tell that they're playing something they practice a gazillion times. And it's like, okay, that's good for a record date or something like that. But man, live performance, I want to de-learn. I want the spirit to come and tell me something that, to put all that stuff together to make it go somewhere else,
Yeah. So with your students, how do you approach that? I've heard you talk about teaching and trying to get students out of that playing what's practiced mindset and giving into the moment. What's your approach with students that are maybe too into the books or?
So we go back to that very old technique of antiphonal, call and response. I'll do something and I'll say, you do what I do, right? And then I'll start giving them things that allow them to see that, oh, this is a little bit more open, You can scat outside of the chord change and bring it back. You can, if you hear me going in a direction with the melody, if you add another note here, it opens up something different, right? And so I'm constantly telling them, yeah, this is written in the standard form, but it's written for you to bring your own personality into it. It's written for you to bring in the fact that you did a midterm test in one of your other classes and you got an F. Aren't you pissed about that? Put it in the music. I mean, this music is for you did you have a tooth pulled? Did you lose somebody? Did you get a blessing of an extra $500 in your bank account? All that stuff is important to bring out your emotion. So you got to get out the books. The other thing I do is a hammer your bluet technique. After you play the song 3 or 4 times, I have you turn the sheet music over. Because when you keeping your face in that music, it's a crutch. It becomes a crutch. You need to learn as much as the song as possible, and then you need to make mistakes. But there's no mistakes in music. Once you got that format and the form and everything, those things can become musical.
And since we're talking about students and development, I kind of want to go back, if you don't mind.
Okay. No.
I know you grew up in a musical family. I'm curious what your life was like as a kid and how you started on the drums, why the drums. You're clearly talented as a musician. So what got you started on the drums, and what was that like? Lessons, no lessons?
Okay, so I've heard stories that I was always pounding on stuff. I used to pull out pots and pans and move them around because I like the different sounds and beat them. So really drums is my first thing to be able to get out aggression, I guess. At the same time, in the house, somebody was always singing. My mom is the oldest of 8. She played piano. All of her brothers played something, from guitar to, I had one uncle who particularly, this is what really convinced me about the drums. He played snare drum in the orchestra. He played timpani. He played mallet instruments in Washington University Orchestra in St. Louis.
Oh, wow.
So I was able to go with him to rehearsals and things like that before he joined the Air Force. He gave me my first legitimate, real Ludwig snare drum.
Oh, cool.
With the fish scale, outside of it, man. It was a beautiful drum, man. And he taught me paradiddles, double strokes, flammadiddles, single strokes. He taught me about, I would say, at that time, about 12 of the 32 rudiments that you were supposed to learn as a drummer, right?
Yeah.
I can't say I learned all the rest of them. I don't know, man. But I know that I've taken what I've learned and I've developed them through over the drum set. So that's one thing. The other aspect is like the piano we lived with my grandparents because my mom was very young when I was born. So a lot of our time was with our grandparents. Even after my father separated, she married another person. That didn't work out. We went back to my grandparents for a while till we were getting on our own. So we were a family that on Sundays and Saturdays we'd be watching big cinematographic movies, Magnificent Seven, all this kind of stuff on TV, and I would be at the piano on the commercials trying to play what I heard in the thing. So that gave me a sense of orchestration because I was always curious and interested to learn all of the parts. If I heard strings, brass, percussion, piano parts, lyrical things, flutes. I'm enthralled by flutes. I still want to get a flute and learn how to play.
Oh,
flute.
Really?
Love flute, man. I love it. Of course, my wife is like, well, you should be playing flute now, lugging all these drums around. Even though I don't move drums anymore, I still got to take my cymbals and my keyboards.
Right.
But I guess there was always art around.
So when did you get a drum set in the house then?
Oh, well, there was a drum set that my uncles had when we were at my grandparents' house. When my mom and I moved out together, the trumpet player I was telling you about was also a drummer. He got me a set of drums when we got our first apartment that I had. I think I must have been 7 or 8 at that point. Right?
Oh, wow.
So we had drums there, and he was at the house all the time, and we're listening to Donald Byrd and, of course, Freddie Hubbard. Of course, everybody Miles, but Miles wasn't the thing that wasn't always our go-to. There were so many other wonderful trumpet players that he exposed me to. And as he was part of, which I also became a part of as a young man, BAG, Black Artists Group, which is like built out of the community in St. Louis, like the AACM was built out of the community in Chicago. And actually those two were like this, because it's only a 6-hour difference between St. Louis and Chicago. So
yeah,
that's a whole repertoire of music I was exposed to early because the guys from that were in St. Louis were going to Chicago. Guys in Chicago were coming to St. Louis. I was always in a library or a community center in the Black neighborhood where poets and these incredible musicians were making music, and I was a witness to it. And, oh, let's get a little Burrage to come up and play congas or play the cymbal or do something, always, I couldn't, I was never in a situation where I'm sitting there listening. I was never like too young to be invited to come up to play. So,
oh, that's wonderful.
So that's my childhood. Even though St. Louis was extremely violent, I pretty much had a fight every day. I went to Catholic school. I had curly hair. The ignorance of this system in America would have my own people wanting to fight me because my hair was different than theirs. I had to grow up with that stupid mentality, right? But it's part of living in a city where that type of stuff is perpetuated, the ignorance and the violence. At the same time, I know that when I got home, I was safe and there was always music, right? There's always music in the family and in the community. So my childhood was very, very colorful. I was also an athlete.
Oh, you were? What did you play?
I boxed at the boys' club.
Oh, wow.
I played football on the little league team for a little while. I played hockey for 7 years of my life. I thought I was going to be the first black
no kidding
professional hockey. Yeah, absolutely. Again, that was a violent sport.
Oh, yes.
The reason why I stopped it is because I had braces. And you can see I never finished with the braces. I'll tell you a story. I used to box and play hockey at the same time. So I'm always in a situation, but I was also starting to play jobs, right? This is around junior high, early high school. And I'm like, man, I'm tired of getting beat up or being in a fight and have my mouth is hurting and stuff. I want to be on a gig, and with everything also, growing up, I was always interested in girls. I'm fast. Always interested in girls. There was a lot of girls in sports. There was a lot of girls in music. So, but eventually I said, you know what, the whole sports thing is, I got a high school football story I won't even go into, but that whole thing was just, I was getting too beat up. In other words, not just, I'm talking about beat up, but just physically beat up. And I'm like, I think I better focus all my energy completely on music. So
did you take lessons at all with anybody, or?
I did. I took early on, very young, formal piano lessons. We all went to the community piano teacher. My mom, her brothers, the whole family had teaching from her until she smacked my hand, and my mom was like, "No more of that." So I had some formal drum lessons, like being at some of the community centers where there was people like Philip Wilson or Charles Bobo Shaw, great drummers that were from St. Louis. They're both gone now. Or maybe Steve McCall came to St. Louis to do a gig. These organizations, BAG and AACM, would always have some kind of situation where youth could learn different things. So in that setting, I wasn't one-on-one with Philip or something. It might have been 2 or 3 other little young drummers. And we broke up the drum kit, and he would be there, and we would do that type of thing.
Okay.
But most of my learning was hands-on.
Because you started playing so young.
Yeah.
What one thing I heard you mention in an interview that I wanted to ask a little bit more about is you mentioned that Joe Charles taught you how to play "quote unquote" breakneck. Like real fast, but very relaxed. Can you talk a little bit about how he explained that and what your approach is?
Absolutely. So when you're first starting out and you're just trying to navigate swinging, first of all, the mechanism of independence between your hi-hat, your bass drum, and then your swing being consistent. What he taught me was how to let the stick work by itself almost. He had a technique that, a lot of people are just now developing today, but a lot of the older drummers always had it. It's between the wrist and your fingers and allowing the stick to bounce a little bit, right? But you always keep that control, fulcrum between these two, right? So his thing, Joe Charles was very heavy. He was a big man. He was overweight. But when he played drums, that was never a hindrance until he was getting older and stuff. But, the way he played was so relaxed. And I think it was just that, and there's also a little bit of push motion with swinging, as opposed to, a lot of drummers. I was also playing a lot of funk, a lot of rock and roll.
Right.
And it was more like stiff. The stick wasn't moving on its own, right?
Mm-hmm.
Joe played all those genres as well. So he helped me to be able to develop this. And it was perfect because after that, I didn't have a playing situation that was as intense as until I got with McCoy.
Right.
And with McCoy, it was so intense. All of that stuff he taught me just kind of came into play naturally. I was able to push and keep the intensity, but also try to be relaxed and breathing,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's one thing that's so awesome about watching you play now, too, is you are just so relaxed, comfortable, and having fun, no matter, even on your own, even in the same gig, you're playing multiple styles and dynamics. Did you ever have a problem switching between playing funk and jazz and having to kind of work out the dynamic differences? And
so with that, I would say no, I didn't have a problem because I grew up in such a diverse setting, playing all types of music. But I did have a problem with dynamics, playing with certain people, like starting to play behind different types of horn players or singers that weren't as intense as my normal, job range. For example, it was almost a curse sometimes for a few years after with McCoy, because with McCoy, he's like, play everything you hear, and it was always very intense. But he taught me how to use dynamics, jazz, the way he played intensely and intently in a jazz ballad. But when that type of gig stops and you're on the road for 3 years doing that, and then I get back to New York and I get called by Lodi Carr or one of these wonderful vocalists, and I'm like, I had to go back a little bit and say, hold on, you got to back up a little bit, because music is all about dynamics. And I had to go back and study some of the other guys again. Like Art Blakey was one of the masters of playing very soft but very intense. It's still intense, but the dynamic would drop to nothing. You know what I mean? And so those things, at one point, it kind of became a problem. Like I said, I'm honest and transparent. When I was younger, man, I'm thinking I'm going to have all the top gigs, but life didn't work like that. So I had to change myself. I had to let my ego kind of come down a little bit, because it was a big shock, some of the things that happened in my career. The blessing in my career is that a lot of those things that were happening musically that I didn't understand, that could have made me go into a bitter point. The blessing in my house is that I had children that needed my attention, and they needed me to focus another way, which also allowed me to develop my academic professedness, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And things like that. So I know I learned quite a while ago, I have to look at the larger picture here. A lot of times it's not going to be, you're not going to be up here doing those gigs with Sonny Rollins and Pat Metheny and all the people that you play with. You have to, life takes you in other ways, and it's a beautiful thing.
It can be equally as rewarding.
Exactly. And it was, Yeah,
because I know you moved to Florida for a while to raise your daughters, and you stayed in the music scene down there, right? You were playing.
I did. I was playing with Sam Rivers. Sam Rivers lived right there in Orlando. So
that's right. That's right.
He hired me to do some of the big band gigs, and I put together a band from some of the players that were in his particular band. And so, I kept the life going on. And occasionally I was still getting cars. Like when I was down there, Archie Shepherd's like, hey, man, I got a month tour in Europe. I'm like, okay, I'm there.
That's cool. So you could still do that even though your kids were small?
Oh, yeah, because in Florida, we were at my mom's house. So I had grandma there.
Oh, excellent.
And the other thing,
nice.
too, and even with that, I have so many other skills, Craig. It's like, I was also a cable engineer. I know how to put in digital phones. I did all of that stuff back then.
Wow.
As I was pursuing, and the time where I wasn't touring, I'm doing that, but I'm also developing, because I knew I wanted to teach at a prominent university. I had already come from doing some subbing at the New School and teaching at other colleges, right? Before my first marriage that I divorced, I was teaching at the University of Arts in Philly. So this is all before Florida, right? So then when I got to Florida, I'm like, well, let me just get this regular job. And I got that regular job, which turned out to be a blessing because I got more skills how to do things. But at the same time, it allowed me to sit and write, how would I teach a course that I really want to teach? So I was able to put together ideas for a syllabus. And
so was that when you ended up going to Penn State?
Exactly.
Okay.
I was asked to play a concert at Penn State with the great Sonny Simmons, who's no longer with us, and Cecil McBee was the bassist. It was trio, right? So when I went there, a math professor who was running the Penn State Jazz Club, he was the advisor to the students. When he was a student, he was a jazz club member. His whole life has been at Penn State. So he invited us up, and he and I started talking, and we hit it off. We became like best friends. And I'm telling him, some of the struggles. He says, man, you know what? You have so many skills. You should probably write out a proposal. I'll present it to some departments at Penn State, and we'll see if we can get you something. So from that, I don't know if you can see that. You see this poster right there?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it says Artist in Residence at Penn State. And I got all of those different organizations to support it.
Oh, right.
I wrote a proposal for a 10-day artist in residence so that I could present ideas for courses and present who I was to the School of Music. So what happens is I got up there, I got hired by African and African American Studies Department, and I got hired by a department called Integrative Arts, which was designed to integrate, performance arts, sciences, and all of those types of things. I never got hired by the School of Music. School of Music was the first ones who told me they would hire me.
Interesting.
So I went back to Florida, and 6 months later, I'm trying to hear from the School of Music. I never got hired. In the interim, I got hired. I got an email from the Integrative Arts, and they said, we're interested in your course, your hip hop music and culture course. So I ended up doing a hip hop music and culture that I presented to them, and a course called Worlds Closer, which is actually music of global cultures.
Oh, wow. Cool.
I ended up teaching those two courses with cross-listed by a few different departments, never the School of Music, but all of the performing, when I got there, all of the performing artists, students in their number one bands were coming to my house to get playing experience.
Oh, fantastic.
It's crazy.
And so that kind of brings up something I wanted to ask you about briefly. You taught the hip hop course at Penn State. And what's interesting when I was reading about you and listening to other interviews is you moved to New York and lived in the Bronx right around the birth of hip hop. Right. And me as a white kid living in Minnesota, my only exposure to any of that was the movie Beat Street, and that kind of stuff. But you were living there. Do you have any recollections you can share about what that was like, absolutely, and who you were meeting? And
absolutely. I met Jerry Gonzalez in one of them school where they were playing hip hop and salsa mixed together.
Oh, wow.
Because I used to live in Hunts Point in South Bronx. It was actually really crazy, man, because the Bronx was still, you could smell the burning from all of the burning buildings and stuff, that the gentrification and all of the moving people to put a highway. Yeah, I was part of that movement. Now, my driving force was to be a jazz musician. So no, I didn't spend all of my waking hours with the hip hop people that were developing in those schoolyards, but I did have interaction with them and a lot of prominent DJs, because when I first moved there, I had gone on my spring breaks and I knew a lot of professionals, but still, I'm starting from the ground up. I had a snare drum, one tom inside of a bass drum on one of them aluminum pull carts, and a hi-hat and one cymbal stand in a duffel bag with my cymbals. I would be on the subway every single day, going down to the village and sitting outside of jazz clubs, and then maybe going somewhere in Harlem before I would get back to the Bronx. And when I get off the train at the Bronx, now the thing that saved me was being a musician, because a lot of times there was super gangs in the Bronx. I could tell you many stories. I got off the train and I'm like, cats wanting to steal my stuff. And somebody would say, well, nah, man, that guy plays with so-and-so over in the schoolyard, right? And then at one time, they actually made me set my stuff up and play. And they ended up breakdancing right there on the corner while I was playing. But that saved my life, So I never had
Oh,
any other
wow.
problems after that, It was very powerful experiences I had. Plus, I grew up pretty much fearless as a kid, and
Mm.
everything they would tell you not to do when you go to New York, I did. Don't go through Central Park at night. I walked through Central Park at night.
Mm.
Didn't have no problems. Don't go to the Lower East Side at night. But I had to go to the Lower East Side because
Yeah.
they had La Mama Theater. It was a theater where 24/7 there was music happening, right? It was
Mm.
Charles Bobo Shaw was one of the property managers, and he was a junkie. There was a lot of junkies back then, but I had access to go in there 24/7 and could play. He
Oh,
had a grand
nice.
piano there. He had congas and all kind of stuff there. And if you just got tired and you didn't have a really decent place to go, you could sleep there. So I was involved in all of that.
Oh, nice. And you were,
Yeah.
sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, and during that time, you were also embraced by and around all of the drummers that are kind of at the top of our lists, Alvin and Billy Hart and Higgins and Danny Richmond. Can you tell me about some of those experiences of first?
Right.
Well, one thing I want to ask about too, maybe you can start with this, is when you got to New York, from what I remember hearing, is that sitting in with Sonny Fortune, like Billy Hart had you sit in. What was that like? And nervous? Did you feel confident? What was that like?
Right. So we just revisited that story because I have a brand, Mobe, MOBE, Music of the Black Experience. And I got some help to give Billy some money and give Reggie Workman some money to come and talk. So we just did that about a month ago. We did that in January. And I was talking to Billy about that story. And he was like, I had come up on my high school spring break and I was sitting outside of Sweet Basil's and somebody invited me in. They saw my stick bag. They invited me in or whatever. And then I'm talking to Billy. I believe it was Sir Roland Hanna or Woody Shaw that was there, who I had met when they were been in St. Louis. So they knew that I could play.
Oh, okay.
I moved back there to Billy, and he said to me, "Hey, I see you got a stick. You want to play or something?" I was like, "Yeah." And so he just told the story a few months ago. He said, "Well, when he looked at me, he felt that I could handle the job, right?" So I ended up sitting in with them, and that was it. After that, I was Billy's sub for not just Sonny Fortune, but many people, Pepper Adams.
Oh, wow.
And from there, I want to circle back to La Mama Theater, because La Mama Theater also Lester Bowie's big band used to rehearse there. Arthur Blythe's band used to rehearse there. This group Air with Steve McCall and Henry Threadgill used to rehearse there. So many people used to rehearse in the space, right? Also, Danny Richmond used to rehearse there with, not Danny Richmond, Freddie Waits used to rehearse there with a band he was working with dancers. And so, I met him at La Mama Theater before seeing him playing with Richard Davis. I knew Freddie from recordings. Of course, he was in McCoy's band long before me, and I have those recordings.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And he saw me play, and he liked how I played. Next thing I know, I'm subbing for him for Richard Davis. From some of that meeting at La Mama Theater. So there was a lot going on. La Mama Theater for me was like a carryover of one of the community centers in St. Louis where I grew up, because it was frequented by St. Louis musicians and all types of other musicians, the ACM musicians, bag musicians, and the New York musicians. There was a lot going on there.
Yeah. Okay, before we move on too far, I need to go back to when you were a kid. I mean, you've probably told this story too many times, and you already know what I'm going to ask about. You performed with Duke Ellington when you were 9, but not as a drummer, not on piano, poetry.
So he had, I believe it was his nephew doing that. This was during the time of his sacred concerts, where the poetry was based on verses out of the Bible or Psalms or different things like that. He had a full choir and his full big band. It was beautiful. Although I didn't know how beautiful it was then, because speaking about being nervous, I was scared to death. But his nephew got sick. My aunt worked in the African American Studies Department at Washington University, which procured Duke Ellington's performance in St. Louis, right? So she got wind that they wanted to hold auditions. So out of 100 young people, I got it.
Oh, wow.
So I remember, being there and they handed me something to read. I read better at 9 years old than I read now, so I was pretty articulate.
And
And I read the
you
poem.
have photographic evidence too on your website, which is cool.
Yeah, and we have other pictures which I'm just not gonna post. Those are personal.
Oh,
I have
sure,
pictures
sure.
of him hugging me and
Wow.
holding me. It was his birthday at the event too. It was this
Oh,
big old
wow.
cake. So
Oh, wow.
so that's how that happened. I did it. During the rehearsals, I think we had like 2 days, 3 days rehearsals before the actual event. I'm always over by the drums. I believe it was Sam Woodyard on those gigs, and
Oh, cool.
I'm like just blown away,
Yeah.
And by the half part of the concert, they wheeled out a small set of drums, which let me play along with him during the concert.
Oh,
After I did
really?
the poetry, yeah,
Oh, no kidding.
it was just beautiful.
Oh,
And
that's amazing.
he sent something to my mother saying that I had an incredible talent and that she should I was born to be an artist and all this type of thing. He was just a beautiful man.
Oh,
And
that's
then I did it
awesome.
again with them in another city. And that was my extent of it with Duke Ellington.
That's very cool. Okay, so I have a list of some questions. I'm just kind of want to go down. I don't know if these are going to be too deep or not, but things I'm curious about. Do you still practice now to keep your chops up, or you play so much that you just stay in shape? I'm curious about what practicing looks like for you right now. And then I have some questions about earlier too.
Okay, so I would say practice looks like rehearsals with the band.
Ah, sure.
Practice looks like when I'm showing a different feel or a passage in the music to the students in our big band ensemble at Brooklyn College.
Oh, yeah.
Something like that.
Okay.
Practice being able to just sit home and practice like what might happen now is if I get a day and I get down on the drums and the keyboards, hours are gone. I don't know where they're gone, but they're gone to me playing.
Mm-hmm.
So it wouldn't be like particularly practicing some type of rudiment or how to do something, but it would be like practicing if I have a new idea about a melody and trying to formulate a rhythm to it, or if I hear a song coming, I start to do it, and then I'll make a recording of it and try to capture it that kind of way. But no, I really wish I could devote 2 to 3 hours a day to practice, but life, man, I have a nonprofit.
Yeah.
I have a production company. I got so much stuff going on. It's like, but I don't regret it because I do get enough playing time. And I know that my chops are up because I'm riding a bike every day pretty much.
Yeah,
and I'm just, So.
Well, since you brought up the nonprofit, I do want to talk about that. The World Rhythm Academy, which you have with your wife. Fantastic. I watched one of the promo videos you have about your Gen to Gen program, like senior home engagement. Can you talk a little bit about your motivation to start the nonprofit and how that's going?
It's going right now. We're establishing our board, so that's something very important that we are doing. It started with I have a uncle who was the Congressman John Conyers, who did a lot for jazz. He was out of Detroit.
Mm-hmm.
He's gone now, but my uncle was his right-hand man. And I spent a lot of time in Detroit doing a lot of things, playing there with different artists, traveling in and out of there, playing there with my cousin who had a band there, and my uncle working with my uncle. He's like, I'm working with John Conyers to do something. I know you have some ideas about stuff you want to do. So I wrote down this whole schematic for World Rhythm University. The concept was because I had gone to Africa. I had been to India a few times with Woody Shaw, with Chico Freeman, with some great bands. And I was like, I met all these incredible players from these places. And so I wanted to bring them in a situation. The concept of it was to be able to acquire funding, support some type of way where I can have a revolving university at different locations throughout the world and have a staff of great players. Like maybe Trilak Gertu from India, alongside of Dennis Chambers and with a great bass player from Africa and somebody else. And they can rotate these different places and bring the cultures together musically. That was the whole concept of it, and which is still what I really want to do before I die, to be able to do something like that. So then when I got with my wife and we started to go through the formalities of getting the 501c3, and they were like, well, university is complicated as a 501c3. So, we had to call it an academy, which actually works out better because we do have an offshoot where we want to be able to train interns in music instruction as well as in the sciences and arts and geography, which is what she does.
Oh, right.
And so from there, we've been doing stuff, man. We've been doing sporadic because we don't have constant funding, but we bust our ass to get things done because we're present. We're doing things on a yearly basis. I have festivals that run in Brownsville, New York, East New York. And now we're expanding because I have some partnership to also be in Crown Heights and Bed-Stuyvesant and things like that.
Oh, nice.
Under our banner of World Rhythm Academy. Last year, I activated 2 stages as opposed to 1 at Livonia Park. But we also have these educational things that we took into different middle schools, going around the world, again, with her sciences and geography. And then I can present arts and cultures from those places in the world just to expose young people that it's there. And, and actually, in some kind of way, we're all connected to that type of art and culture in our lives.
Yeah.
So that's really the purpose and the vision of it.
You clearly stay really busy. I mean, it's not just music with you, it's the nonprofit, teaching. I'm really curious about what your daily routines are or disciplines and habits that you have to keep yourself, A, so productive, but also so positive and, just present all the time.
The biggest inspiration is looking at how the world is crumbling, and I cannot allow myself to get depressed with that because I'm a very sensitive person. And trust me, there's been times, Craig, I'm, depressed. I mean, to be real with you, last year, I almost died from overstress and exertion of working so much. The loss of my uncle, the loss of didn't get my second college contract renewed. And that's a big deal. I was teaching at 2 colleges for over 8 years. That's a big deal. So I started to regress and do things that I hadn't done for years, like moving drums for a $250, $300 gig, which I had my doctors like, you can't do that anymore. You're 64 years old, And it got to a point where actually at Smalls, I was playing and I passed out on the gig with Jack Walrath, as a matter of fact.
What?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
and then
man.
That turned into something even more nasty. It didn't have to. I don't want to talk about all of that here on this podcast.
Yeah, okay.
But it's like I couldn't get the thing taken down for months. And it was kind of like a breach of my characters. I'm getting emails from people all over the world. Are you alive? Are you okay?
Yeah,
blah, blah, blah. So to answer your question, I get up and I pray to God and I thank him. I drink my water. I try to do a little bit of exercise and get ready for my day. I ride my bike to campus on Mondays and Wednesdays when I teach. If I'm not teaching, I try to get a ride in, a minimum of 15 to 20 miles. And then I get on my work day, researching, writing grants, grading papers. I got one class where I got probably about 40 students right now. And I got to do that when we get off of this. This is the grading paper night. so I can catch up.
Yeah, and the students keep you motivated too, right?
It keeps me motivated. And I got children, man. I'm trying to, make sure that they have everything they need. I have, a property I maintain. I'm my mother's power of attorney. So I have too much to do to get pulled in a dark place. I just have too much to do.
Yeah, you're really inspiring to watch online and just to talk to. You're just a wonderful, wonderful person.
Thank you, man. I'm blessed. I'm happy that we agreed to do this because for me, it's also one of the things is that I have to tell my story. Nobody else is telling it.
Yeah, well, okay, this brings up another question. How's this autobiography coming along? I heard that you were working on one or want to work on one. You need to.
My wife is up there. She's like, when is it going to be done? I'm like, it's just a process, you know? But she told me something recently that is very important. I don't have to have it completed. And I said, you know, you're right. Because, you know, I could put out chapters. So what I've decided to do now, and I have a boatload of footage from video performances with my band, with other people, interviews and all that stuff. So what I've decided to do now is try to put some of that together, send about, 300 pages to an editor. And I want to do something multimedia. You know, I'm looking for some support, but if I don't get it, I'll do it myself.
Yeah, you need to. You lived through such an amazing time in St. Louis and in New York. And yeah, I really would look forward to that coming out. And
well, I gave myself a deadline that by the midsummer, I'm going to have something to an editor.
Oh, great. Okay.
Yeah, because I can't keep, I have to, because like I said, and tomorrow's not given, but if I give myself deadlines, I know, and it's probably get to an editor before, you know. And the other thing too is, you're right. I absolutely have to tell my story because, like I said, it's nothing is given, and it's a very unique story, you know. So
oh yeah,
I need to tell it.
Okay, well, I don't want to keep you too much longer, but if I could just go through a couple of questions here.
Oh no, we're good.
So I heard you talk about My Favorite Things being one of the early records that really grabbed you, and I'm curious what other albums you got into that weren't your family's records, the stuff being played around the house, but like what you went out and got for yourself from the library or whatever.
So that's a great question because I got a lot. Like I was inspired by so much, right? I absolutely love Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention. So I must have his whole catalog.
No kidding.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
No, that's a surprise. Listen, yeah.
From St. Louis, one of my best friends, Henry Claude, he's a great percussionist. He plays in the St. Louis Symphony. He's been there for years. He's a great drummer, all around percussionist. We're very close friends. He's white, I'm black. You know, when he's older than me, but when we were in school together, he saw that I had an affinity for playing funk and jazz. So he was humble enough to say, help me with that. He saw I had an affinity for wanting to play timpani and mallets. And I was humble enough to say, help me with my reading. So that's what we did. We got together with each other. From Henry, we were exploring all kind of stuff. We found a record, a Spike Jones record. All the old time percussion stuff they used to do on radio. And so we love that, man. So of course, transitioning from that is Frank Zappa, because he did all of that in all of his music. It's so humorous, theatrical, so dramatic, but at the same time, so forward-thinking and innovative. He was one of my big inspirations in music, right? So I went out and I got all his records. On the other side of that, of course, I had all of Andrew Hill's. Point of Departure was my point of departure. When I got that in junior high, I'm like, oh, this shit can do this? Oh, yeah, okay. Of course, Elvin. Elvin was a staple. Art Blake, I got all his records. Max Roach, I got all his records. Although I love Max, Max was always a little too regimented for me. I never felt the wildness, but that doesn't take away my respect and my deep love for Max.
Absolutely.
He knew that, but I like rawness. I guess it's just from, my background and my character. I like the rawness of drums. Drums are like connected deeply to the earth and connected deeply to everything that's not earthly, because it's designed to put you in a state of trance, in a state of wonder, because rhythm can do that, especially very powerful rhythm. It's like, so that's my deep connection. Other things, other people that I graduated to, Bill Bruford, one of my favorites. So I got all Bill Bruford records, records, anything that Bill Bruford's on. At the same time, Tony Williams, obviously, everybody went to Tony. I got all of those. I got all of Billy Cobham.
Oh
I
yeah.
met Alan Dawson in high school, so I went backwards. I never heard Alan Dawson on the record until I met him when I was in high school.
Oh
He
wow,
came
wow.
to my high school. My high school was part of a program that back in the day, a lot of various cities in America had this satellite program where they were doing progressive education with arts. So my high school was one of those. We had an international jazz week for the whole time I was there.
Oh
Each
cool.
year we brought artists from different. So this one particular year, the most inspiring was they brought Woody Shaw, Junior Cook, Alan Dawson, Rufus Reed, with a local piano player named Ray Kennedy. Incredible, man. That's when I first met Woody. I met Alan, and after meeting Alan and spending the week with him, I went back and found out, oh, that's where Tony got that from. You know what I mean? Because before that, I was just like, oh, what is he doing? But
Yeah, yeah.
Alan put it all in perspective.
Did you take lessons with Alan during that week or
Oh, yeah, absolutely. During that week, they weren't like one-on-one
okay, yeah.
because I was in my sophomore jazz ensemble, but the senior jazz ensemble had me as their drummer because the senior drummer couldn't play as agile as I could. So
Mm-hmm.
we spent the whole week with them, taking them around, doing what they wanted to do. They adjudicated big band and small bands from around St. Louis that came to our high school auditorium to perform. As a matter of fact, that's when I met Dave Weckl, because his high school was in competition with my high school big band, right?
Oh wow.
Dave looked and sounded exactly like Buddy Rich. He was killing. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
killing. But on the other hand, I think we won that composition because we were doing transcriptions by Andy Laverne. We also had some big band charts that was transcribed of Earth, Wind, and Fire.
Oh
So we were
wow.
doing some really eclectic
Oh
stuff,
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
so they all chose our big band over his. But actually, at that moment, Dave and I became friends because we didn't know each other. And we got mutual respect for each other, how we played. So from that period, I had all of the Parliament Funkadelic records. I had this group called Cold Sweat. They were another horn band like Chicago,
Oh, okay.
but they were more like, I think kind of almost more progressive in a way.
Oh, cool. I'll have to check them out.
And then, I was being influenced by a lot of my uncles too. So I had all of the Yusef Lateef, all the Roxanne Roland Kirk records, all the Charles Earland records, all the Rufus Harley who played. My uncle's like, hey man, this is a brother playing bagpipes. Listen to him. you know? And so I was inspired by all of that. And I just, when I started buying records, those are the types of records that I went for.
Oh, that's cool. And that kind of puts your music in context for me a little bit more because you're so open-minded and your influences are so diverse.
Absolutely.
That it's, I'm trying to even think about how to explain you to like my fiance or anybody else. I can't say, oh, he's a jazz drummer, he's punk. Like, you don't really fit into a box, which is
right. And
awesome.
That's always what I wanted to. I never wanted to fit in a box.
Mm-hmm.
I think boxes have messed us up, because it's too much music out here. And even if you are in a box, you can't know it all from that box. It's just too much. So for me, and I try to teach my students, yes, we have a jazz ensemble, we have a jazz big band, but I'm going to write an arrangement of something that you've never heard and it's not a jazz standard. Or I'm going to write something completely for your instrumentation with a different type of feel, and I try to expose them to as much music as possible because I think that's been the downfall of jazz in particular, because you got too many people trying to emulate stuff that people have done, and we cannot do it better than Monk or Papa Joe or any of those guys. And I think deep in my heart, they're turning over in their grave saying, why are they trying to play the same things we played? We played that for them to do something different with it, and for me to find that space to do something different is to broaden your musical palette.
What about your process for learning music that's not yours? I understand when you're composing music, it's yours. You have some ownership of it, so it's comfortable for you. What's it like when you get gigs, other complicated music, and what's your process for that?
Well, now see, my process is if I can get the music, to check it out before, which typically doesn't happen anymore because, well, you're kind of known for, oh, Ronnie, just call Ronnie, give him the music, right? And I have to read it. So my process is messing it up on a live gig, but being able to be proficient enough where nobody knows I'm messing it up. But no, really, I would like to have something that I can really study the music. And if I have time, I do put in the time to study music. So my process is, because I don't want to go somewhere and be sloppy, especially somebody else's gig. But, we live in New York, man. 9 times out of 10, it's like sometimes I'm not the first call anymore, which I had to make amends with too. Back in the day, I was on the A-list. I was the first call. So now sometimes it's like, oh, well, let's call Ronnie. We know he could do it, but the guy I really wanted couldn't do it, so let's call him. So I got to be able to read the music, In those instances, if as much as possible, I try to say, hey, man, send me the chart. Let me have something so that I'm not just totally thrown a loop,
Yeah, sure.
But I do love that challenge too, because my career, I was called for those types of things. Like when I used to work with Julius Hemphill Big Band, he's writing something different every time. And we'd have to work it out on the gig. But I felt good because I knew I wasn't the only one working it out.
Yeah.
It's the entire band. So
Right.
If we gonna mess up, we all gonna be messing up. So it was cool,
Yeah.
But back in the day, that was part of it. That was part of all of our processes. We love that. Today it's like people are too scared to be vulnerable, and for me, live music has to have that vulnerability. We should be able to have that vulnerability. We should be able to, especially if it's a high level gig, high level gigs don't all the time have to be exactly tight and exactly verbatim, because then you lose the nuances of humanity, man, to me. In that instance, then have an AI big band.
Yeah, right. One other story that I can't go without asking about is you've mentioned that Kenny Clark has picked you up at a train station in the past, like in Europe.
Oh yeah. So Kluk, he was, when I went to Paris, the very first time I went to Paris was with Defunct. It was a funk band, right? I'm the original drummer with Defunct, right? Kenny Clark was at the gig.
What?
Yeah, he was at the gig because first of all, it was black music in Paris.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay. Sure.
So Kenny Clark supported all of that. He was always there. The next time he saw me was with McCoy Tyner, and he was like, and it was like a month's difference or something. And so I was talking to him in between the two, and he was like, "You play this, you play that." And I was like, "Yeah." So we became friends, right? He invited me to his house. Every time I would go to Paris, I would call him from a payphone and say, "Hey, I'm in Paris. Can I come over? Let's eat some food or something." He's like, "Yeah, come on over." So then eventually it got to the point where we were talking constantly. He's letting me know if he's going to be in the States or something like that. And, a couple of times I'll say, "Hey, I'm coming to Paris and so-and-so." He's at the train station. We go to eat lunch. He drops me at the hotel. That's what I'm saying. I'm extremely blessed. I don't know anybody in my generation that had those types of genuine experiences, right? I met his son. His son is also a lawyer. We had a relationship, man. And I miss him dearly because he was just so cool, and just his stories about people that he played with and how the energy was just so positive in the midst of all of the segregation and cats in the army and all of this. Oh man, but he was always so upbeat and just always so positive.
Did you ever get to talk drums with him or have him show you anything?
Oh no, we never showed it. Our time was spent in a cafe or on the way to a gig, on the way to dropping me for public transportation, or even if he sat at a gig where he saw us, after the gig, we're breaking down. No, I never said, I wish, but we never had that. We had, and to be honest with you, what we had was so much more because it was so much more of a personal connection. He already knew me as a drummer. I already knew him as a drummer. So our friendship, it was a genuine friendship. So I couldn't ask for anything more.
Thinking about Kenny Clark reminds me of another thing I was curious about. How did you get your brush playing together? Do you remember when you first...
That's Philly Joe Jones. I had some one-on-ones with Philly.
Oh, wait a minute. Really?
Yeah, I had one-on-ones with Philly. I had my first one-on-one with Philly was in Philly. I was playing out there with Sonny Fortune, and he came to the gig. And he's like, let me show you something, young blood. You know, we sat down and he played, and I was like, oh, he showed me how to do some flip stuff. He showed me a motion back and forth with my left hand, and then the right hand was, you know. And then the next time was in Amsterdam at a place called the Bim House. I'm playing with Woody Shaw. On the break of our concert, they called me up to the bar. They say, Ronnie, you know, you got a phone call. I go to the pick up the phone, and this guy's like, Warten for mich, Herr Burrage. I said, Philly? He said, yeah, I'm up the block. I'm coming. So we played the second set. And by the end of the second set, he's standing up there with his big leather coat on, like looking like Count Dracula.
Oh, man.
I ran up, gave him a big old hug. We went to the bar. He had his brushes. I had my brushes. We was at that bar for about 6 hours. They threw us out at 8 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, my gosh. You have so many amazing stories and experiences. Just wild. I can't wait for this autobiography to come out. All right, man. Well, we should probably wrap it up. I'll let you go.
Okay, thank you, Craig.
But where's the best place for people to follow you? And is there anything you have coming up that you want people to know about?
I have to update my website. I have a bunch of different great projects coming up. We're going to be at the Kennedy Center in the summer. I believe it's in the summer. I'm going to be touring Europe a lot. I'm back with the McCoy Tyner Legends Band. So it's an all-star band. It's
nice.
Really great band. And then I have Holographic Principle dates coming up too. So
cool. Okay, and you're on Instagram too, so people can find you on Instagram. But then otherwise,
Instagram. I'm still on Facebook. They can find me there. The best thing though is my website, ronnieburrage.biz.
Yep.
And like I said, I'm updating that constantly, so the calendar will be updated like by the end of next week or something.
Okay, cool. I'll put all the links in the show notes and stuff so that people can find you and follow you. I just want to thank you so much for doing this.
Man, thank you.
I can't even tell you. It's an honor.
No, it's my pleasure, man.
Fun.
Thank you for doing this.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you for doing this.
Of course.
We need more of you.
Well, all right, man. Well, I really appreciate it. Okay. I'll just say thank you, and we'll talk again.
All right, man. Have a great day.
Thanks for listening. If you like the show, please subscribe on your platform of choice and share it with a friend. You can find the show at practicingdrummer.com or on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram as Practicing Drummer.